about thriving women and what does that look like. And so my next guest, her name is Doris Bell, and Doris is a biologist, a PhD trained toxicologist and executive coach working at the intersection of neuroscience, stress physiology, and leadership development. Her work focuses on helping high performing professionals strengthen resilience, regulation capacity, and sustainable performance in high pressure environments. She's going to talk to us today about why high performing women burn out quietly, the biology of stress, recovery, and sustainable leadership. So please help me welcome Doris Bell to the virtual stage today.
Yeah, hello, and thank you very much for the introduction.
Welcome, welcome.
So, can you hear me? Okay, so yes, I would like to discover why high-performing women burn out quietly. So, if you are someone who is highly capable, highly responsible, and used to function under pressure, and someone who also other people rely on, and you just keep going. You solve problems, you manage complexity, you carry responsibility, and often responsibility for many people at once. And then, despite being successful on the outside, there are moments where you feel strangely disconnected from yourself. Not necessarily exhausted, but somehow no longer fully present in your own life. And as a biologist working in corporate for more than 2 decades, and now back to academia, I know this experience of feeling disconnected. And this is not only emotional, this is biological, physiological. And if you allow me, I will now take you on a ride into your body, the physiology and neurophysiology of what we call stress. You probably have heard about these stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and that they prepare the body for instant fight or flight reaction under an acute, life-threatening, stressful situation. And this is a natural, you might say, healthy and life-saving program, which evolved and adapted over the thousands of years. And only in recent decades, or you would say a century, in modern times and our high-paced lifestyle, humans are experiencing something we call chronic stress, where the so far natural balance between activation and recovery, between effort and rest, has given way to a permanent hypervigilance. So many of us, and I tend to say most of us, are living under chronic stress. And today we can measure many of these stress-related physiological changes clinically. For example, through heart rate variability. This is one of the strongest indicators of nervous system flexibility and recovery capacity. And research also shows that chronic stress affects immune regulation, inflammation, sleep, hormonal balance, body weight, cognitive flexibility, and can even affect premature aging, infertility, and heart attacks. But what few experts speak about, long term before the body collapse physically, chronic stress already changes the way we think, we decide, perceive, and lead. And it narrows the awareness. It reduces cognitive flexibility, makes decision more difficult. It weakens emotional regulation, and it cuts you off from your creativity, from being a visionary. And eventually, many people stop feeling that they are consciously shaping their lives. they begin reacting to life, feeling as in a hamster wheel instead of leading their life. And one of the consequences of chronic stress is, in fact, that we gradually lose sensitivity to our own internal stress signals. The body keeps communicating through tension, sleep disruption, elevated heart rate, or exhaustion. But over time, many people, especially many high performers, they stop to perceive these signals accurately. Yeah. In neuroscience, this internal perception is called interoception. And one of the brain regions deeply involved in this interoception is the so-called insula. This is a structure closely connected to your autonomous nervous system, mainly the vagus nerve, and to the limbic system, where emotions are processed. So when a woman tells me, I don't feel like myself anymore, I don't even know what I truly need or want, I do not hear weakness. I hear that her nervous system has been operating in chronic activation for too long. And this is also where chronic stress starts to affect decision-making capacity. Yeah, because chronically activated nervous system shifts the brain toward short-term survival processing. Yeah, you are always in this fight or flight. Your patience decrease, so your emotional balance is gone. You are more reactive with your emotions, and your strategic thinking narrows, and your creativity declines. Yeah. So over time, many women continue functioning externally while internally losing the flexibility, the recovery capacity, and also their access to deeper self-awareness. And this is why I say burnout does not begin with a collapse. Burnout begins much earlier and almost quiet. It begins the moment functioning becomes more important than feeling. So when you override your feelings, the moment we repeatedly override our own signals, and the moment chronic activation becomes the new normal. Because once we lose this interoceptive awareness, we also lose access to this important source of intuition, self-regulation, conscious choice. And one of the areas strongly affected by chronic stress is the hippocampus. This is a brain structure involved in learning, contextual thinking, memory integration, emotional regulation, and the cognitive flexibility. So in other words, exactly the capacities that high performance in modern life requires. So a biologically overloaded brain becomes increasingly reactive instead of adaptive. And yet sustainable leadership requires the opposite. So it requires the ability to remain conscious under pressure, to stay flexible in complexity, to regulate emotions without suppressing them, to make clear decisions even during uncertainty. But the encouraging part is the nervous system is adaptable. This interoceptive awareness can be rebuilt. Regulation capacity can be trained. So the balance between the sympathetic activation and the parasympathetic recovery can be restored. And this is where the vagus nerve becomes highly relevant. This is a major part of the parasympathicus. Because when we learn to support the nervous system more effectively, we gradually improve recovery processes through the body. So sleep quality improves, peace of mind, emotional regulation improves, cognitive flexibility improves, and even the brain itself begins to recover. The hippocampus that I mentioned is capable of neuroplasticity and of rebuilding under supportive conditions, such as restorative sleep. and emotional safety. So which means that supporting nervous system regulation is not simply about relaxation. It is about fully restoring the biological conditions. And from my perspective, this requires 3 biological skills. The first is biological literacy. So get to know your body, the ability to recognize your internal state before your body forces you to stop. So the first step is awareness, such as, can you recognize your physiological stress patterns? What is causing your stress? Can you notice the moment when your nervous system shifts into activation? And can you observe how your internal state changes your thoughts, your communications, your relationships, and your decision making? Because awareness transforms unconscious reactivity into conscious choice. The second capacity is recovery competence, because recovery is not just a luxury. It is not something you earn after exhaustion. It is the biological foundation of sustainable performance. Sleep, nervous system downregulation, emotional recalibration, restorative pauses are not optional extras. They are your biological infrastructure. And without recovery, the nervous system loses flexibility, as mentioned. So the third capacity is regulation capacity. Because many reactions we experience under pressure are not conscious decisions. They are subconscious survival patterns, you could say. Old beliefs that limit your actions and your personal growth. And these beliefs may be like, I must prove myself. I am only valuable when I perform. Yeah. And these patterns back create biology, because the way we interpret situations determines the stress response we activate. Yeah. Two people can experience the same external challenge, but their nervous system responds completely differently, depending on your own internal belief system and narratives. So that means sustainable success is not only about external strategy, it's also about your internal regulation and what you think. So you can test yourself. Can you remain conscious under pressure instead of becoming reactive? Can you regulate your thoughts and emotions before reacting? Yeah. And can you create internal safety instead of operating permanently in survival mode? Because self-leadership ultimately means choosing regulation over automatic reaction. And this is exactly what I do in my mentoring. We work on biological awareness, for example, with heart-brain coherence, our nervous system regulation with tools like breath work, meditation, tapping. We work on subconscious stress patterns with tools like NLP, systemic work, systemic family constellations, also with symbols, and on then rebuilding your interoceptive awareness, and on shifting from automatic survival strategies to conscious choices. And suddenly creativity is back, joy is back. You feel like getting back into the driver's seat of your life, and often a very different relationship with yourself, which subsequently improves partnership, relationship to friends, family, business partners. So maybe, let me come to an end, maybe sustainable success is not about becoming someone else. Maybe it's about reconnecting with the parts of ourselves we had to silence in order to keep functioning for so long, with our clarity, our creativity, our intuition, our ability to feel when something is no longer healthy for us. Because when we begin to listen to the body again, instead of constantly overriding it, we do not become weaker. we become stronger and we become more whole. If this resonates with you, I'm happy to continue in a personal call. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doris. And how can people connect with you?
I think the easiest way is just go to my website. It is dorisbell.de, or to send an email to info@dorisbell.de.
Thank you. What powerful information and some real understanding of what the nervous system and how our bodies hold things. It definitely was, you had me fully tuned in. So thank you for sharing that.